you have any CDs? And I was like, no, I don't know, man. Maybe like in my, treasure box from my mom up in the attic or something.
Yeah.
I'll look and he's like, I'll pay anything. I don't care. I'm part of this global collectors punk rock group.
Really?
And I was like, dude, I'm gonna see if I can find one then. And I had a copy, and he said, what, how about $25 in shipping? I'm thinking this is amazing. Like the thing, absolutely.
Yeah.
I send that thing out within 3 weeks. I'm getting like a 2 or 3 messages a week.
Really?
People all around the world, Argentina, like all these Japan,
Wow.
and I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And
Yeah.
so at one point, I was like, hey, I could send you guys the digital. Like I have the tracks,
Yeah.
and they're like, no, we don't want that. This is like a collector's group.
Okay, and I'll add music and graphics and stuff all afterwards. Cool. All right. So yeah. So you go ahead and look at the cameras, and I'll count you down. Let's go in 5, 4, 3.
Welcome to the Sellouts. I am your host, James Schramm of Schramm Financial Group. Here we discuss all the main topics of selling your business, exiting, trying to sell your baby, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Today, I have my good friend, Brandon Stuart, with me. We go way back to high school, and he has been a serial entrepreneur. He has built up quite a few businesses over his time, and he's sold a few of them. And so today, we're going to talk a little bit about the businesses that he's had and how he sold them and how they differed and some good things that he learned through those experiences. So, Brandon, before we get going, do you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself, more, or less about the businesses that you've started?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's good to be out here and
Yeah,
having a conversation about this
it's
stuff.
good seeing you again.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm a creative director by trade. Always been an idea guy. And so I can't really help it. I think for, the last 20 years or so, even though I've worked in advertising and marketing at studios and agencies, I've always been ideating. I've always been tinkering, wanting to just be a maker, produce ideas. And that's really the part of the process I enjoy the most is bringing an idea to life from nothing into existence.
Yeah,
That's kind of my favorite part of the process and all of the area I think I'm the most effective.
yeah.
On the other side of that, those need to at some point turn into businesses. Those ideas, unless it's
That's
just
that's
pure
the hard
passion.
that's the hardest part sometimes.
Yes, that's accurate. So I mean, other than passion projects, I've managed to bring a couple of those ideas into fruition, into existence as businesses, all across areas of experience of my life. Most of what I've brought into a business, turned into a business, has been inspired by something in my life: a baby product, a pet food company, a reservation platform, and also just a creative studio that's allowed me to do and pursue some of my writing and some of my other film work.
That's great. So out of those, you've created, I think created lots of LLCs and lots of different businesses. How many different businesses do you think you've created?
Oh boy. In it,
Successful and unsuccessful.
sure. Probably, maybe 6 or 7,
Okay.
maybe in the last 20 years.
Wow.
And that includes a 501(c)(3). That's a
Yeah,
charitable
nonprofit.
organization. Yeah. That I formed with 2 other guys, but yeah, probably about maybe 6 or 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
And two of those you've sold two of them, right?
We have. Yeah. Yeah. 2 of
And
those.
which ones were those?
So one was called Reserved, which was a reservation platform, a technology we developed,
Hmm.
and that pivoted to becoming a capacity management solution during COVID.
Yeah.
So wild sequence of events there, but that's gone on now it's part of Clear. So it's actually part of Clear's suite, their free onboarding
Oh.
version of their reservation platform for
Hmm.
airports mostly.
Hmm.
And that was again a crazy sequence of events with started with a merger and ended up with an acquisition.
So when I use Clear at the airports, I'm using part of your product in
If
some form or another.
if you use their free product and it's still called Reserved, which as a creative guy is very special to me that it's still called Reserved. But then and then the other one was a baby product. Yeah, that was inspired by my premature twins, and
And that was
that
called Bokee, right?
that was called Bokee.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
actually
the
bought
bottle
that.
keeper.
I thought it was great. I
All
bought one of
right.
those. I thought it was a great invention. So
Well, thank
tell
you
me a
very
little bit
much.
about Reserved and kind of
Sure.
how it got started and kind of the transition to selling it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Reserved, and what's cool about Reserved too is that was the original name, RSVD,
Hmm.
and it's rare in these, in my experience at least, that the original creative identity gets to make it all the way to the finish line,
Yeah.
usually for any number of reasons. Usually, availability to use that name, or
We're just rebranding.
yeah, rebranding, or it takes on the product features themselves evolve and it needs
Hmm.
to represent something different. So pretty special that made it all the way.
Yeah, that's great.
But yeah, when I was working within the Omnicom group as a creative director, and when I came out of there, my former boss and I decided to come together on this idea, which really centered around the observation that it was odd that people spend so much time waiting in line when we've figured that out in certain categories, like restaurants, for example. That's
Hmm.
the obvious one, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, if you're going to go to a busy restaurant, you're probably going to look into whether or not there's a reservation solution.
Yeah.
Yet we will go to other, we'll go to the DMV or the get an oil change or wait 20 minutes at a food truck and all of these other areas of our lives that now especially 5 years later there are reservation solutions that have emerged, but at the time we were inspired by Square, who had gone out and created a white labeled credit card solution where all of a sudden food trucks and garage sales and anywhere could take a credit card, and we thought, why doesn't that solution exist for reservations?
Yeah.
So any business could onboard this platform, brand it under their own identity, and now suddenly they offer reservations. This could also be monetized heavily, particularly in festival settings. So picture Comic-Con where people wait 2 hours for an autograph,
Oh, yeah.
and imagine if you could for $20 get a reservation slot where this 10-minute window you get to go to the front of the line.
Yeah.
So kind of this fast pass for life mindset.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so we came together and decided to build that thing, and that was the start of Reserved.
So you kind of gave the idea to Disney because they've monetized the heck out of that.
Yeah.
It's like the only way to go to Disneyland now is
We were
is by
inspired
paying.
by Disney. Yeah, because Disney, though, we did talk a lot about Disney because
Yeah.
think about their universe. They have
Mhm.
a controlled universe. And we did go through and identify, okay, if we were at Comic-Con, where are the 20 different places we'd wait in line? Who's going to fund this? Who's the payer? Who's the buyer? Is there a sponsor? Is it presented by this? Is it, is it all individual B2B? Can an individual, could talent themselves offer up their own reservation slots for a meet and greet? Do we want the peripheral businesses to participate? So you can imagine the way that this just
Kind of
started
morphed.
to reveal itself to us. And the same went for other environments, like I mentioned oil changes. It seems very silly. You'd think that's a pretty obvious one, but Jiffy Lube, who became a client at the time, didn't have a reservation solution. So they knew the majority of people Saturday morning grab their coffee and
And say,
head on over to take care of that.
yeah,
Yet people pull up and see 7 cars and say, I'll have to deal with this later. And so they were a quick example of it where we could implement and make it really easy. And they didn't even need to monetize. They just wanted to fill their bays and scatter, distribute the demand a little bit better.
yeah, yeah. And that kind of monetizes itself as they
Yeah.
can, make sure they can have better capacity to handle it,
Right.
to handle everybody. So at what point did you feel like you didn't just have a product necessarily, but it was a business that you could turn around and sell?
Well, I surrounded myself with business people.
There you go.
That helped. I brought in the designer, the user experience, and a good friend who's a CTO.
Mhm.
So I knew we could build this. I knew it could exist. But to your point, it needed to suddenly become a business, and for that to exist, and for that to be the case, we needed to expand the team. So
Yeah.
once again, we attached a CFO to it who'd come in and start to make sure we're buttoned up on the logistics, which, especially when we started raising money, became that much more important. That was a new experience for me.
Yeah. So I was going to ask about that. Well, so let's go to the CFO. Did you bring in somebody that had experience selling companies or building them
Yeah.
like that?
He was a known relationship and was a close relationship with my partner that I'd gone into business with. So thankfully, this original core team was all people we knew within our network, and
Yeah.
we kind of saw ourselves a little bit as the launch team. I was doing this under my own entity, my own creative studio, and at the same time incubating 2 other businesses. So
Yeah.
we weren't all in already. Nobody was all in. Everybody was seeing ourselves as incubating this product.
Yeah.
But once we started to identify, how this becomes monetized itself, what the different revenue paths were, how we're going to raise money, how we're going to bring on staff, it pretty quickly became a legitimate operation.
Yeah. So let's talk about how you raised money. What paths did you guys do? Did you give it equity? Did you just do straight debt?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a stressful part of the process for me. It's something I'm not eager to do again. I know it's inevitable. Once you hit those walls and you can't go anywhere without capital, that's necessary.
Yeah.
And the reason I say it was stressful is I'm just a emotional creature. I'm caught up in the idea and the potential, the vision. We can do this. We're going to change. We're going to eliminate waiting in lines. In lines. We're giving people their lives back. And then around me is the reality. The reality of, okay, that's great, but we don't have product market fit yet. We don't
Mhm.
know, which I learned a lot about. We spent a lot of time. It doesn't matter how great you think the idea is. until someone's demonstrated, or until the market's demonstrated demand, and
Yeah.
not only demand, but willingness to pay for that
Pay
demand.
for it. Yeah.
You don't know what you have yet or don't have.
Hmm.
And in fact, that's an amazingly sobering experience.
Yeah. You may think it's the greatest idea in the world,
Yeah.
but if someone's not willing to pay for it, then
Yeah, and usually I do, and then I'm brought down to earth pretty quickly, and I'm surprised. On looking back, it's I'm surprised by some of the areas I was wrong, and
yeah.
some of the areas that I was surprised by, and some of the areas I was right. That's interesting, and that's an interesting part of my entrepreneurial journey is that learning.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we set it up to just make equity available through safe notes, which was
Mhm.
also a new thing to me, and I couldn't even tell you I still understand, even though I'm a part of a few of
Those
them.
are more of the complicated ways to structure debt
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think, what I learned, and I started to see how common those were being used. Again, I was a part of them in a few cases where I was providing creative services, and I started
Mhm.
to learn that that was a way to commit to equity without having to modify your cap table at this time. You just account for it now, and therefore you have a future vehicle to distribute that equity. So that made sense. But we also did go out to friends and family, and that's tough. At the time, it's very exciting,
Yeah.
and I had different reactions from different people. I had people that thought, okay, I want to support you. And then I had reactions from people that are, you know, thanks for bringing an opportunity. I want to be a part of it if this thing's successful.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful. I'm very grateful on the other side of it that, for the most part, that was a good
That it worked
investment.
out. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting when those worlds collide, when
Mhm.
when this thing you're building that is wildly high risk could impact, penetrate your family and friends.
Yeah.
So we had kind of a mix. We didn't have a big investor roster. We had a little bit of institutional money come in,
Mhm.
but even that was through a personal relationship that was representing that fund.
Okay.
And it was more of a scout fund. It was an investment that is looking for early stage ideas
Yeah.
like this.
Kind of like a venture capital.
Yeah. 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 And then we had 3 or 4 other investors, and that was it. It was
Okay.
enough for us to build the product and bring on a little bit, some staff.
Did you guys maintain over 50% control in that
Yes.
process?
Yes, we did. Yeah. And then we had a little bit of a pool, talent pool for some advisors we brought on and some staff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with Bokee, was that a similar kind of transition of, hey, I've got this idea, and then you found investors, or how did you go about kind of bringing that to light?
Totally different.
Mm.
Yeah. Again, I don't, in my experience, there hasn't been I know there is a method to the madness and a science, but in my experience, and going all the way back to when I'm incubating these things in 2018, 19,
Mhm.
20, and then COVID impacting everything,
Yeah.
there wasn't my method to the madness was just how do I make this idea exist? How do I get it into people's lives and understand if it's working for them and bringing them value.
Yeah.
So, yeah, with Bokee, fellow Hart
Oh,
alumni.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew went to school with us too.
Yeah. And he's the best.
Mhm.
And, we're still in business together. And he and I happened to have kids on the same day. So I had my twins the same day as he said he had his second baby,
Okay.
August 3rd, which ended up becoming the inspiration for my creative studio name, which is Author, August 3rd,
Mhm. Oh,
AUTHIR.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. And it's also, an author is the deliverer of narrative. That's kind of where I love to play. So
Mhm.
the name made sense, but it is also August 3rd.
Oh,
And
okay.
one day that'll hopefully my now 7-year-olds will be excited by that.
Yeah. That it's an honor to them.
Sure. Yeah. So Andrew and I, when we came together around that idea, the nice part, one of my favorite things about the Bokee, which is a baby product, right? It was a simple one piece solution to a universal problem, which
Mhm.
was trying to prepare a baby bottle while you're holding your baby, right? That's, thousands of years
Yeah,
of,
right. I
however long.
remember buying that product and being able to just stick it on the table,
Yeah.
and then having my kid in one hand. And I think I bought it. It was my second child at the time. And so you've got a kid running around the house being chaotic, and you're trying to put this bottle together, and it's just a mess, right? And
Yes.
so I thought it was an ingenious invention.
Well, what's so fun about it is we came together around the pain point.
Yeah.
And to me, that's such a powerful place to start. That's same with Reserved,
Yeah.
is just kind of maddening to wait in line for all of these things when just a simple, why is technology not facilitating that for
Yeah.
us everywhere these days,
And
right?
the technology existed. We just didn't implement it.
Exactly. And why aren't we, why didn't we had dreams of the fast pass for your life on Reserved where it was going to, the technology would cascade through your day.
Okay.
Manage, we know where you are, we know where you're supposed to be. We could we had all these crazy
Yeah.
ideas, it just and the exit opportunity presented itself before we
Yeah.
built on those. But I was going to say on Bokee, we came together on the pain point.
Hmm.
I've been trying to get Andrew to do an idea with me for years. And this one he lit up on and said, wow, yeah, that's tough. Plus, moms that are pumping and transferring breast milk, when you spill that breast milk, it's devastating.
Yeah.
And so I talked to my wife about that as well. And she aligned with the fact that this could solve that problem as well. And we thought, no way, this is so cool.
Yeah.
So we started the IP, the patent. We formed the business, which we called 83 Ventures, which still exists, which is also August 3rd. But we decided not to raise money on that business.
Okay.
And I'm grateful now that that was the case, even though we were, getting by on the skin of our teeth at times.
Yeah. So what was the thought process behind
Yeah.
not raising capital?
Well, the thought process was I'd had the reserved experience. These are parallel. These are happening at the same time.
Yeah.
But we had brought in capital unreserved, and I think I started to realize there's no going back.
Mhm.
There's other people involved in your business now. And the emotional weight you feel, even though you disclose the nature of the investment.
Mhm.
For me, at least, just knowing that other people, had capital tied up in it.
Yeah.
We agreed we'd go as far as we could, as far as we could self fund this operation and it's different being in CPG versus tech where we can move product. If we can run a sale and generate a little more revenue, we can, our run rate, we got another month.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we just thought, let's run this out as long as we can. And it's pretty sweet that the two of us can make a decision. We get along well. We have completely different minds. He's an engineer and a logistics and operations genius.
Mhm.
And the fact that we could just come together and make a decision to move on it. We don't need approval. We don't have to update anybody. That it was just such a clean way to go about it.
Yeah.
But we did a couple times run into the reality. I mean, we learned from a lot of other, we say parentpreneurs, these
Mhm.
parent entrepreneurs. And we pretty much didn't really run into any that weren't raising money.
Yeah.
Because everyone's, it's this race to scale.
Yeah.
And especially when you start into valuations and stuff, it's interesting because what we were seeing, which surprised me, was so much focus on the revenue, even if you were spending to produce, a great deal to produce that revenue, versus what I would think would be more interesting would be that organic movement of, volume that then you could pour gasoline on the fire. But
Yeah.
there was a big race to scale always, that was constantly the conversation. And we did run into walls a few times where we couldn't spend to advertise or to convert in more of a, Amazon marketing environment.
Is that how you guys mainly grow? Was just social media advertising, or how did you guys go about doing that?
Yeah. We launched our Shopify site, which I love Shopify.
Yeah.
Just what an amazing gift to entrepreneurs that exists. And
it's cheap, it's easy,
yeah,
super user friendly.
You can have it operating the same day and
Mhm.
sell your product. It's funny, the barrier I see, which others don't see as a barrier, is the back end, the tax and the finances and stuff, which for other people comes very natural. It doesn't to me. So,
Mhm.
but the front end and the identity, the brand identity, the smooth nature of the user experience, I mean, amazing, right?
Mhm.
So we launched on there, and we didn't launch on Amazon initially, and that was intentional because we felt we had we didn't have any feedback yet,
Yeah.
and we didn't want to we didn't want to get Amazon wrong. We thought having this direct relationship with a customer would give us a more direct sense of what we have here or don't have.
Yeah.
Plus, we could better manage what the sale price. We weren't sure yet what people were willing to pay for it, what the tolerance level was for paying more, buying two. We just had a lot of learning. We felt like, the first 6 months should just be test and learn. Are people using it? How many are we getting returned? Do
Mhm.
people care for one color more than another? Just learn and then bring those learnings into Amazon. So we go in and try to crush,
Yeah.
once we finally enter
So how
that
long did it
environment.
take you to get into Amazon?
I think let's see, we launched at the end of 2019. I think maybe a year later or so,
Okay.
somewhere around there, we finally launched on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, a lot of times people bring in capital, not just for the capital, but also for a strategic partner, right?
Mhm.
Do you feel like that's something that, looking back now, that you wish you would have done? Or are you glad that you guys never went and brought in a partnership of any kind?
Well, we did enter a licensing deal.
Okay.
And so in our mind, I think that was our version of that.
Okay.
What's interesting was one of the challenges was Bokee is both the business and the product.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also not a natural product that you are going to, it's not a big cart value.
Mm-hmm.
So we started to learn pretty quickly, okay, we have some limitations on what we've created. We think this is going to be the next, a Bumbo or whatever. My kids are 7 now. I don't remember all the products,
Yeah.
but we thought, okay, we don't need more to the business. We just need to sell. We need to make this a household name.
Mm-hmm.
And we were picking up a lot of traction with organic, not some paid PR, but also some really tremendous validating traction from parent publishers and distributors, like awards and stuff. We were
Yeah.
getting a lot of really cool validation there, but we did start to realize, okay, are there going to be other Bokeh products? Are we going to be, the suction company and then apply that philosophy, which we did spend a lot of time on.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time refining and getting right before we launched. And so I think that's a good question, because I think if we could go back in time, yeah, there might have been a scenario where we should have merged with maybe an e-com group earlier, or maybe another brand even,
Mm-hmm.
and we did talk about that. When we entered our licensing agreement, it was a version of that because they kept the brand intact.
Yeah.
So it still was Bokeh, even though it was being sold by a large manufacturer in partnership with their brand identity.
Yeah.
So we did get that opportunity and go through 2 years of that experience before re-entering the wild and, reaching our conclusion, of selling it off.
Yeah. So when you sold that one, how did you structure that deal and trying to sell that?
So we originally were hoping the licensor would just scoop it up and do with it what they will,
Mhm.
because we were such a small piece of their strategy.
Yeah.
That we recognized, even though it was everything to us, it was just a little tiny thing, to them in their catalog and in a massive business with enormous amounts of volume.
Yeah.
So I understand why they didn't, but we did flirt with that idea because we thought, well, you might want, to insert this somewhere at some point. It's a feeding accessory. It's
Yeah.
a nice little add-on. It could be buy a high chair, get a free Bokeh, that you could just use it in different ways.
Yeah.
The other thing we learned was the value of the story. So if you think about these big manufacturers, what do they lack most of the time? And I'm not necessarily referring to brand story. I'm talking about product story. We had a genuinely inspired by a parenting experience.
Yeah.
My premature son, who was 1 pound, 13 ounces when he
Wow.
was born.
1 pound.
Yeah, little guy. I'm in the middle of the night, setting him on the ground to make his bottle, apologizing to him,
Yeah.
just thinking, how can this be how it is? And, there's a moment in time there where it was, there's got to be a product, and then coming together with Andrew to actually develop the solution. But that story was merchandised, and that story appealed to people. That story, parents connected to, they recognized the pain point. They, felt loyal. I think there was a sense of loyalty in the category to knowing real parents were behind the product.
Yeah.
I think that baby products are a category where you are maybe a little less likely to buy the super cheap knockoff because you are going to trust it to some degree interacting with your child.
Yeah, and it's not just a marketing ploy to
Right.
make a quick buck, right?
Yeah, so that was something else that we realized was there was story value here. So after that licensing agreement, though, I'd never heard of acquire.com. I'd never used that before. And a former business partner turned me on to it.
Mhm.
And I'm so grateful for that. It was such a cool, interesting experience. Productizing, going through the exercise of,
Trying to pitch your stuff.
yeah, what is it? What are we going to put this out on the open market?
Yeah.
And also, it was a crazy, wild set of conversations. I mean, I'd wake up every morning and I'd have 15 new messages from all over the world. Norwegian baby products we like your design. We want to do this. We want to do that. Some people were interested in the brand and the story. Some weren't. Trying to navigate all those conversations, trying to figure out how to arrive at a valuation, how to
Yeah.
entertain the first offer we got, which fell through,
Oh,
which was
okay.
pretty intense for us.
Was that hard, like emotionally, to go through that?
It was hard emotionally for a variety of reasons. I
Mm.
mean, we'd kind of made peace with, this needs to be in the hands of people who are really good at selling,
Yeah.
which none of us were. I mean, It's definitely not what Andrew or I do. And also my wife, who had gotten heavily involved, was she's a strategist, but selling was none of us have that experience of actually just scaling ecom.
Yeah.
So we recognized we were hitting the wall again, where it was going to require a capital strategic partner. And we all decided we'd rather incubate something else.
Mhm.
Our passions lie in solutions, versus just trying to take this from here to there. So it was emotional for just arriving at that conclusion. I mean, we've lived with this. We kind of joke this product grew up with our kids, and then here now it's going to be in other hands.
So do you feel after you've sold, a lot of business owners regret their sale in a lot of different ways, whether it's their valuation or getting out earlier, or they just didn't have anything to do. Your mind's always thinking. So and you're young enough that I don't feel like that would be the concern. But were there any regrets in how you sold that business?
No, I'm happy to say no.
Good.
In our case, even this week, we've had a conversation about learning of a friend's business that's going through some hard times and feeling relief that with we're in a crazy year, election year, there's a lot of intensity out there.
Yeah.
And we feel a sense of relief that we arrived at our destination in
Yeah.
that regard. When we formed the company, it wasn't to be just that product. It was to incubate solutions and enjoy working together, making things, and we've somewhat re-engineered what we do too, because we realized all those things I mentioned that we're not very good at, we recognize we don't want to do them again. I mean, we can build a product and license it or patent it, or maybe we can provide, we've entertained the idea of helping other small product businesses learn from our experience. I'm even doing, working on some writing that's actually about the parentpreneur
Okay.
experience. So we're at peace with where we are with it. And also now, we don't have babies anymore too. It's like
Yeah.
we're kind of out of the baby space.
Hmm.
And as I mentioned, early on, most of my ideas have come out of things in my life that I just have a hard time unseeing after we've seen them. So yeah, no, we're happy with it. And it, we're excited that we can consider it successful.
Yeah.
We originally said, what do we want to do? We want to license this thing. We want to sell this business one day. We don't want it to become this dead weight. We don't want to shut it down.
Mhm.
And every one of these businesses has had those moments
Yeah.
of, being on the ropes. So for us, we feel we did license it, we did sell it, and we managed to stay off the ropes and, come out the other side and be able to do new things.
That's great. That's
Yeah.
great. So how would you contrast this to selling reserved and kind
Yeah.
of that process? Because that was a little different.
Very different. I mean, acquire.com is really cool. I'm not plugging them.
Yeah, no,
here,
it's
but-
kind of the Wild West though of trying to sell.
Yeah.
Like everybody's coming at you with totally different ways of how
Yeah.
they want to buy. And
in hindsight too, there's definitely things I would have done differently on there. I didn't know what I didn't know at the time. And it's tricky when you do entertain an offer and suddenly you're entering, you're going to enter diligence, and then you lose all your momentum with everyone else. It's kind of like buying a house,
Yeah.
you lose. That's unique to that platform, which I know they do to protect the integrity of the transaction, but it also really challenges the sellers, because when that first deal fell through, I mean, re-engaging people that I hadn't talked to in a month and a half, who had, they were trying to scoop up ecom brands for their portfolio.
Yeah.
I mean, that was tough.
Yeah.
But that was when we arrived at the right buyer, which we ended up having two buyers, and it was kind of a cool opportunity where they were going back, we were going back and forth with both of them, and we ended up selling it for more than we asked for. We were really happy about that.
That's great.
And they were really cool people, and we connected on a personal level, and they were the people that bought it were one of the only people who asked for a sample, which I thought was surprising. It's the first thing I would do, or I'd go buy one. So that, I would say that was smooth. On Reserved, it was interesting because we had pivoted our reservation platform to provide a social distancing solution, which suddenly waiting in line, if you think about when, go back, early COVID, you weren't as worried about waiting in line for convenience.
Yeah.
You were worried about being around other people.
Yeah. How fortuitous that you had kind of come up with this idea right before COVID. right?
Well, yeah, we just didn't know it. We didn't
Yeah,
know
yeah,
COVID was
you had
coming, and
no
we didn't know
idea.
we had. And that's one of my learnings for sure is being
Mhm.
able to pivot and just understand where you fit in because time and circumstance and social demand and all these things. I mean, we thought we're going to help all these people with this convenience solution. And in reality, the most traction we got were businesses interested in having not only being able to provide a solution to manage capacity, meaning there's only 10 reservations to get in here and get your ice cream or whatever,
Yeah.
but also being able to market that because businesses were struggling. So the moment they could say we're using technology to keep staff safe, et cetera, that became valuable to them in that way. So that was definitely one of those 72-hour pivots. I
Mhm.
spent a lot of time working on the deck, trying to figure it out. Devastated that we were losing things that we'd secured because they were canceling events.
Yeah.
But once we picked up a little momentum there, it was interesting because we were approached through a mutual relationship by a business out of Argentina that was doing something very similar and wanted to expand in the US.
Yeah. And
And so they were made aware of us and approached us and we started to entertain some sort of a merger opportunity. And that's what we ended up doing. We decided to enter that agreement with them where they already had the infrastructure. They were years ahead of us on the technology and they had raised a considerable amount of capital. So we were grateful we didn't have to go out for another round. It made a lot of sense, but it was a lot of risk too, because there's no telling where these guys were going to take things and what was going to happen to our product. And they were taking our staff, and suddenly we're wound up in these agreements. And but we opted to be relatively hands off at that point because both my co-founder and I we're really all of us are entrepreneurs. We want to build other things.
Yeah.
So this was a nice opportunity, but with no guarantee of a successful outcome. But it wasn't even 6 months before the clear opportunity presented itself for the larger operation. So
Mhm.
so that's an interesting one where we went through a merger and an acquisition in the same year.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So how did you guys get in contact with Clear? Did they approach you or?
Well, okay. Also, Clear is funny too because we were already talking to them, and then this partner that approached this other business that was doing the same thing had
Mhm.
actually secured a couple airports, so they were already providing a fast pass opportunity where you could make a reservation for your pre-check,
Mhm.
which seems funny because you're supposed to avoid the line with pre-check, but some of these airports, the pre-check line was getting long, and so they did structured these deals with these airports, and so I believe Clear caught onto that and recognized, okay, we don't want another player in our space. Plus, I think, and I don't know this, but I think strategically they recognize the value of an onboarding product.
Mhm.
Okay, we can make this available for free, but people will get familiar with our technology, our value proposition, the security involved, and we'll be able to upsell them if they're in the platform,
Mhm.
right? So I think that's where it ended up making sense for them.
Yeah, a lot of times people, once they get comfortable with the technology,
Yeah,
just in anything, then they're more likely to use it or start paying for it. But
yeah,
getting that initial buy-in is just kind of the hardest part. So that's something that
definitely.
Clear
Yeah.
definitely valued. So with them, was there any regrets on how you kind of went out and sold them or?
No, I mean, again, we went through the merger first,
Mhm.
and that was also an emotional experience. I mean, there was a lot going on in the world at the time.
Yeah.
We having this much activity in the startup space at the same time was crazy.
Yeah, I'm
Like, I don't
sure.
recommend it.
Yeah, I'm sure you weren't getting
But
much sleep. You got
oh my
young
gosh.
kids and
Yeah. And I'm
just
working, I'm
yeah.
working in the agency space as a creative director, to support my family. So, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know. And in fact, I'd heard from so many people that, most startups fail and this and that I thought I was hedging against that by starting three things at the same time.
Mhm.
And I didn't expect that they'd all have some life, and live on in some form. And I definitely didn't fully appreciate or understand the intensity that was on the horizon with both the businesses maturing, but also then COVID entering the equation and requiring a great deal of pivot on all of the businesses.
Yeah.
So that was too much. So all of these scenarios, I felt relief and I felt validation because I think the swings, the emotional swings in that startup journey are so extreme. I
Mm.
mean, one day you can't even believe how exciting it is that you won't the Bokee was featured in Parents Magazine, and then the next day you're fighting off a knockoff on Alibaba, and you're thinking, how are we ever going to survive?
Yeah.
And that can be literally back to back days. So the emotional swings involved were so extreme, the peaks and valleys that when these businesses entered other hands, I especially on Boki, I mean that one's a personal, very very personal to me. But reserved, I was excited that it had another life. I thought I'm happy that it's in the hands of people that can do more with it now than I can,
Yeah.
because I'm just not as effective. I can build stories and brands and products, and I'm very passionate about that side of it, and I can thrive in that space. But I definitely have a better sense of my shortcomings, and so getting it almost was, even the merging opportunity on reserved felt like a big victory,
Yeah.
which didn't have a financial return until we were paid out on the exit.
Mhm. In that merger, did you guys maintain control in
No,
in that?
in fact, we definitely gave that up. We had a couple different versions of that arrangement. So one involved us going full time and joining this new venture,
Mhm.
and that was tempting. And in hindsight, maybe would have been a good move, but I was, looking for. I needed to. I was nervous about. I've kind of lived in these two worlds all at the same time. I'm maintaining a job, so I have healthcare. I mean, my kids had some serious special needs and surgeries early on. Like, I definitely need
Yeah.
benefits,
Yeah.
and trying to live in that world, be like, good dad. And then over here, I want to be, wild gunslinging entrepreneur. But I looked at that opportunity going full time as bringing those worlds closer together than I was comfortable with, because now I'm fully in a wildly entirely entrepreneurial environment. So the other option, which thankfully my co-founders opted for as well, was we'll take a smaller piece and we'll let it go. You'll take our staff, you'll take all our technology, all of our brand, and all of our clients, and we'll continue to be involved in an advisory capacity, but otherwise we're going to be following along,
Yeah.
seeing how it goes.
So did you guys help introduce or bring in Clear in that with them, or did that just kinda
No,
not happen naturally?
yeah, it is funny because we had talked to them as well, and we were exploring whether we could be part of their suite as well. And it's interesting in hindsight, and once that opportunity presented itself, that we were part of something Clear pursued, without even. I mean, they were made aware we were a piece of that puzzle.
Mhm.
But no, we didn't facilitate that. We were just, uh, you know, part of that product set.
Yeah.
But we also, they, like I said, they carried through, reserved the name, added the values, or the now it's reserved, spelled out all the way,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
the vowels. There we
The
go.
vowels, the vowels.
But yeah, we by that time had already, even on our own, moved on to each of us individually our next venture.
So before we move on to kind of next ventures, I want to talk about the Bokeh. So I have a client, and this just kind of popped in my head. I have a
Yeah.
client that he's been fighting off Chinese knockoffs like left and right, and
Yeah.
his business was wildly successful, bringing in millions of dollars every year. And then all of a sudden, these knockoffs are coming up, and he's having a hard time getting cease and desist and getting it all
Yeah.
squared away. A lot of he hasn't manufactured in China, and then they're getting knockoffs there. How did you guys combat that with Bokeh?
That's an anxiety-ridden component of a startup in this space. When you're in our case, a one piece silicone item. I mean, we're not difficult to knock off.
Yeah.
So there's a couple different ways we responded to that. So our patent was a design patent, and is a design patent. But thankfully, our design was central to the functionality. If you've used it, right,
Hmm.
it'd be tricky to accomplish the same functionality with a different design. So even though we ended up opting not to pursue the utility patent. There was some existing art from decades ago in the medical field that we thought was going to be complicated, and we were having to make really calculated decisions about our investments. So we opted not to pursue that, but the patent did offer some element of protection for sure. Uh, we always felt like we were kind of under the radar as we were growing, but every day we were nervous about knockoffs for sure.
Yeah.
Then when we entered that licensing agreement, a big part of it was IP protection. This partner is a big business. They've got an IP team. They did this massive audit on us on the risk level,
Hmm.
and there was some risk, but they ultimately had enough buying power with their clients that they could, if that popped up, they could address it by way of their relationships.
Yeah.
They could say, you can't carry this product because this competing product is part of our line, and they're ripping them off, et cetera, et cetera. So we felt really protected in that environment because international IP is tough. I mean, you
That's
can you can get your patents all over the world, and do you have the stable of attorneys and capital to go and enforce them?
yeah, that's what this client he's struggling with. It's not that they can't enforce them. It's just
Right.
the capital and the time to go after all these people. It's just like it's
It's
getting to a
tough.
point where it's not worth it.
It's really tough. And I know I definitely have some horror stories from friends who, we mentioned it's a really amazing community of parent entrepreneurs that come together and help each other out and even give each other a heads up if they're seeing a knockoff, which is cool.
That's cool.
But yeah, they've, it's never ending. And so in our case, we also, I mentioned this earlier, leaned a little bit into the idea that parents might not trust a knockoff. Do you want to buy the knockoff when you're stressed out in the middle of the night trying to feed your baby and it doesn't work? Or if you're transferring breast milk and you're using a knockoff item, do you feel confident that it's food grade silicone, microwave, dishwasher safe, all those things? Because our stuff was certified all the way through and, produced with that level of integrity.
Yeah.
So I think that worked to our advantage in the space. That people were when parents were looking for products, they search blogs, recommendations, they go to baby registries, obviously Amazon. And I think there's just a little bit of little more hesitation than if you're buying something purely commoditized.
Yeah.
So I think that worked to our advantage, but it's another reason when we did sell the business that we were like, wow, we made it.
Amazon's kind of made it a business of theirs to find and be able to replicate things and then
Yeah.
sell it, Amazon's brand.
We were just small and,
yeah.
just this kind of little niche thing, one little one-off that, and, people that found that people that used it and had a good experience loved it,
hmm
but it never reached the level of being you can't survive, you can't parent your children without this, so I think we just kind of had this modest under the radar journey. People would go to, the publishers that wrote about us, all the HGTV lists and whatever things we're on, and they trusted that. Okay, I should pick this thing up. The other thing is there's not a ton of margin. In fact, this is more of an Andrew observation, but I remember him making the point that there's not an insane amount of margin for the knockoffs to go after.
Mhm.
We're not, this isn't a $5 product we're selling for $50. So someone's going to knock us off for 25,
Yeah.
right? If we're selling it for $15, are they really going to go through that effort to, to pick up, $2 or $3 of margin? We'd have to be doing from some serious volume
Yeah.
for that to be worth it. And I don't think it ever was.
That's
Although
true.
I think if we'd continued on that trajectory, if we continue to grow, if it, we're watching now, we're excited to see where it goes now,
Yeah, that's
from
great.
the sidelines.
That's awesome. So, Mr. Entrepreneur, what's
boy.
going through the mind now?
Oh goodness, what's not? I've got so many, so many different ideas. I mean, still working in advertising, so happy to be able to continue to, produce that way. Really, I've got a couple things going that are on the entrepreneurial side. I'm, some investments, which is cool to be on that side of it. I've never, those are no work involved, but I get to get, as excited about
Yeah.
the ideas. So some really cool things that I'm seeing out there. And definitely I made a lot of relationships, which is cool too. In my, 4 or 5 years of being really down in the space, made a lot of relationships. So staying in that space, making a lot of introductions, doing some advisory work, involved in a cool product that we're incubating that's in the addiction recovery space, which is pretty
Interesting.
cool. Kind of this hybrid technology, uh, you know, home experience, something we're working on that's cooking up and with one of my reserved co-founders. And then otherwise, I'm really spending more time in the writing and filmmaking space. I'm doing some creative services on the side, some brand work and video, but I'm really just also trying to make sure I don't lose that side of me that just loves the storytelling, bringing an idea to life in film. Or, I recently joined a literary agent. I have a literary agent now, which is pretty neat. So I'm working with her on some material, and
What
that's
kind of
cool.
what kind of book or
Yeah,
ma-
funny enough, all sorts of stuff. So I
okay.
mentioned earlier, I'm doing some writing that's kind of around the parent entrepreneur
Yeah.
experience, and a little bit of this idea of parenting of innovating through hardship, because, it's sometimes I forget how powerful and real that story, how much of a reaction I get from people when they hear that I have this little premature baby going through surgeries every few months, on a feeding tube, et cetera. And somehow out of that, we incubated a product that's sold around the world. Like kind of a neat
It's crazy.
trajectory that I don't always attach that part of it to my entrepreneurial journey. But it's interesting when I talk to people how interested they are in that because one thing Andrew and I always talk about is everybody says, I have an idea for this, or I always thought they should do this, or why hasn't anyone solved this? And I sometimes get frustrated with that. I'm thinking, why not? Well, let's go. What's the idea? And plowing through those things, I think is what separates a lot of entrepreneurs. It gets hard. You have to do a lot of things that you don't know how to do, and you got to surround yourself with people that can fill those gaps, but you also have to plow through things and figure it out. So I'm doing some writing that's capturing some of that and I'm having fun. It's a little bit therapeutic for me too, I think, to go back and remember some of those crazy early days with my son, especially,
Yeah,
who I'm happy to say healthy now.
that's
And
great.
so is my daughter. But also, yeah, just I'm writing some children's books. I think children's books are a really incredible format. If you think about it, one of the few versions of storytelling that are shared, that are generally offline, that are equal part visual and written narrative, and also it's a tight format. Usually those are pretty short, so there's an amazing amount of creative challenge in that, and I have a really cool network of artists and illustrators. So enjoying writing some of that material too, and I think later in the year some of this stuff will be pitched, which is cool.
That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah, going back to the entrepreneurial topic, you were saying how you just got to push through. And I think that's the
yeah,
hardest part a lot of times. Everybody has great ideas,
yeah,
but action is one of the hardest things. And
definitely.
and moving forward and just not overanalyzing, not being paralyzed by, oh, this isn't perfect,
Yeah.
but at least just getting that momentum and getting that journey started.
It'll never be perfect.
Yeah.
And I think as your questions about do you have regret, it's interesting because it's complicated. I mean, these things are multidimensional, they're personal, they're financial, they're your families are invested in them. It permeates so many different aspects of your life that it's not just this simple transaction in any form,
Yeah.
good or bad.
You have to give up certain areas in different aspects of your life,
Yeah,
but overall you felt pretty good about the
I do.
exits.
And I'm excited that they exist still. That's something that's important to me that there was a moment in time where I thought to myself, okay, people are using reserved and Bokeh every day right now that people I don't know. And
Yeah.
I mentioned this to you when we talked on the phone, but I remember the first when we were selling Bokeys in the beginning, we were looking those people up to see if we knew them, and we're messaging each other. Do you know that? Do you know that guy? And as we started to sell product organically to people we didn't know, which seems so funny, but those that was a big milestone.
Yeah,
And
it's got to
so
feel good inside that
yeah,
it's not just friends and family supporting you, but it's a viable product that people around the world
yeah,
actually want.
that can help people through those challenging experiences. The number of stories we've heard from parents and we did all I mean so many other uses for that product that emerged that we didn't even think of initially. I mean, people started using it for medicine and jars and talk about some of the mobility impaired special needs kids. We donated them to amputees.
Oh
All of
yeah.
our misshapen Bokeys that showed up that we couldn't sell. I mean, thousands in a early stressful production run. We donated to an amputee group, and can you imagine having the ability to what that provided? So there's just so many stories where this one moment of opportunity in a moment of despair and happened to have the right person in Andrew who wanted to go after this with me, and us trusting each other to you know plow through the things we didn't know how to do. It's amazing what that's produced. Independent of the outcome, the business outcome.
Yeah.
It's just sweet that this thing is out there and people are using it.
So as a total collection of all of your experiences, what's been the most rewarding part of being an entrepreneur?
Oh, wow. I think that I don't want to sound so self-indulgent, but I think it's validating to achieve. I mentioned that product market fit earlier
Yeah.
because I think you're so vulnerable as an entrepreneur. You're in so many different ways. I mean, you become somewhat synonymous with this business, with your business, and some people can just, they have the resolve to just mm, plow through that,
Yeah.
right? But in my case, as an idea guy, I think these are good ideas, but you don't know, and so I feel like the reaction and getting the product into hands and hearing from people. I mean, it meant more to me when I would we'd get a message that the Bokee was a lifesaver in the middle of the night than it would when I'd find out that we sold an extra few hundred that week or whatever. Like, that's just the way I'm wired. I just care a lot about this product meaning something and helping people. And it's not as charitable as it sounds, it's validating,
Yeah.
but it means a great deal to me that on the other side of this, I have some proof of concept in my own ability to be an entrepreneur. I like a little bit of product market fit in myself. Like, I could do this,
Yeah. And not in a, like you said, a self-indulgent way or a cocky way, but you have validation that, that your ideas are working and that it gives you that fulfillment in your life,
Definitely.
and that's why a lot of people are entrepreneurs. They want that fulfillment that they're creating and that they're helping people.
Yeah.
Right.
And you
Yeah.
think about too, my dad's an entrepreneur. It's funny when I start to think about the things that I'm working on that I'll be able to show my kids one day. And no matter how much advertising I do, it's probably not going to be that, but I've got the prototype of the Bokee on my shelf. I've got this, children's story I wrote, there's a body of work that I think does represent my, for better or worse, natural drive to create,
and who you are to some extent.
And I think that's going to be, and we were talking about music earlier, it's the same thing. I mean, I'm writing music. I'm constantly just in that space. And I think, as my kids get older, they start to ask questions and want to learn more about this stuff. And I think that's, I think about my own dad, and it makes me think about how interesting those conversations are going to be in the future.
Yeah. That's funny that you brought up the music. I was going to ask, are you still writing music? Is that still part of your life?
Yes.
Is Out of Line making a comeback?
Without delay?
Or without delay? Yeah, without delay.
Maybe that's the next one. I got to track those guys down wherever they are in the universe. Yeah, I'd love to. I'm definitely still writing. I can't help it. I continued on, played some rock music. I played some folk stuff. I still am writing a lot, but it's hard to get old guys together to play punk rock, but I would do it.
Well, Brandon, thanks for coming on. I appreciate you being here. We appreciate you taking the time to tell your story.
Thanks for having me.
So interesting to kind of hear your side of selling and being acquired and merging and all those aspects of it, and obviously value your friendship. But where can people find you?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. I appreciate the conversation too. It's reliving the past here. So yeah, no, I can be reached. My studio is called Author. I think I mentioned that. And it's AUTHIR, August 3rd. And my website's author.co. So AUTHIR.co. And I'm doing creative services and incubating some new products there.
Do you kind of contract out services like that?
Yeah. We're still doing brand work and a lot of video for brands and, some other interesting collaborations and then incubating some new products.
That's great. Well, thanks again for coming on and wish you the best of luck.
Appreciate it.
Investment advisory services offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc., Schramm Financial Group, is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services. Any opinions of those are of the speaker and not necessarily those of Raymond James. This material is being provided for informational purposes only and is not a complete description, nor is it a recommendation. There is no guarantee that these statements, opinions, or forecasts provided will prove to be correct. Investing involves risk, and you may incur a profit or a loss regardless of strategy selected. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Prior to making an investment decision, please consult with your financial advisor about your individual situation. Raymond James is not affiliated with any guests on this podcast.